Now available in paperback and e-readers, Isis Legacy. Sorority secrets of the goddess next door are revealed in this all-new Isis series adventure. Get Isis Legacy in paperback and e-readers at online booksellers everywhere. One of the greatest actors of the 20th century, James Earl Jones, passed away yesterday on my birthday. Now, James Earl Jones passed away yesterday at 93 years old, and he will always be remembered for his iconic voice and many of the iconic roles he played, including the voice of one of the greatest villains in movie history, Darth Vader. Now, James Earl Jones is, again, one of the greatest actors in theater and film and has a list of iconic signature performances in multiple films such as Star Wars, Conan the Barbarian, Field of Dreams, The Sandlot, The Lion King, and even television shows such as Great Gabriel's Fire and Homicide: Life on the Street. And he has, again, also known for being the voice of the TV network CNN. And here in New York, he's also been known in the 1990s for being the voice and the pitchman for Bell Atlantic. Now, James Earl Jones, basically, no one thought he would get to this level of success as a black man who grew up in the era of Jim Crow and was born in 1931 to a mother, Ruth Jones, who was a teacher and a maid, and a father, Robert Earl Jones, who was a boxer, a butler, and a chauffeur. And James Earl Jones's father left the family shortly after his birth and went on to become a stage and screen actor in New York and Hollywood. And as James Earl Jones's father was working on being that actor, James Earl Jones was raised by his grandparents, John Henry and Marguerite Connolly, and they lived in Mississippi, and then moved from Mississippi to Michigan in the Great Migration. And this is where James Earl Jones had developed a stutter because of the trauma he had from basically his parents not being able to care for him and having to live with his grandparents. And I believe that was possibly anxiety that led to him becoming a stutterer. And he said, even in his first year, he couldn't talk. But eventually, what he did was get into theater to help deal with his issues as related to talking. And this basically was the thing that led to him becoming an actor as he got into talking in poetry and theater. I believe this built up his self-confidence. Now, as James Earl Jones was growing up, he eventually attended the University of Michigan and was also in the military. And as he was in the military, he was working on developing his acting ability, and over time eventually graduated up to the level of becoming a lieutenant as he was in working as a soldier, and then eventually became a part of the Korean War. And after he did his service for his country, James Earl Jones then studied at the American Theater Wing and worked as a janitor to support himself as he learned more about the craft of acting. And as he continued to learn more about the craft of acting, he started his first acting job playing in the Shakespearean play Othello, and wound up playing in Othello. That was his first role, and that's a really tough and challenging role. But James Earl Jones, basically, this was what started him out. And as he entered into the world of theater, he acted in multiple Shakespearean plays such as Othello, King Lear, A Midsummer's Night's Dream, Measure for Measure, and also played Claudius in Hamlet. And eventually, as he was out here learning the craft of acting through Shakespearean plays, eventually he got his film debut in Stanley Kubrick's Dr. Strangelove, or How I Stopped Learning to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. Again, one of the great films. And again, this was a great debut because, again, this film, Dr. Strangelove, is considered to be one of the great films of the 20th century. And later on, he then played a surgeon and a Asian rebel leader in a and the comedians alongside Richard Burton, Elizabeth Taylor, and Alec Guinness, and then later on played one of his first signature roles, the Great White Hope, in theater, as he played troubled boxer Jack Jefferson, who was based on the first black world heavyweight champion, Jack Johnson. And that play basically led to James Earl Jones getting critical acclaim, as the play got a Pulitzer Prize for drama, and James Earl Jones got his first Tony Award and his Drama Desk Award, first major awards for performances, in 1967. And this basically started to lay the foundation for James Earl Jones becoming one of the acclaimed actors, just like his contemporary Sidney Poitier. And as James Earl Jones continued on with his career, he did test films for Sesame Street, combining which was those shorts with animated segments. Now, he was the first black person again on this show of Sesame Street, but he with the test audiences, and one of his performances where he was counting to 10 is again considered to be some great footage. People loved that footage. But as he was out here continuing to be pursuing his career, he became one of the first guest stars of Sesame Street. Now, they say Carol Burnett was the first to be broadcast, but he was the first celebrity on that show. And that was a major event because, again, Sesame Street transformed the lives of children. And as James Earl Jones continued on with his career, he starred in the film version of The Great White Hope, which would be again a signature role for him, a signature role as Jack Johnson. Again, this was the role that he made on theater and played on screen, and his performance again got more acclaim, and he got an Academy Award nomination for Best Actor, the second black actor to get an Academy Award nomination for a performance after Sidney Poitier. And this performance again is considered to be iconic. As related to James Earl Jones's career, it is considered one of his signature roles, and one of his signature roles on film that everyone knows him for. Now, as James Earl Jones started, after getting that acclaim, he then continued on with his career, playing in The Iceman Cometh with legendary actors like Paul Sorvino, Renee Auberjonois, Raul Julia, and also then went on to do a PBS great performances, and continued on to play his second signature role in 1974 as in Claudine with Diahann Carroll as the garbage man, who goes to become the guy who wants to pursue a relationship with Claudine, the woman with 6 children, played by Diahann Carroll. And James Earl Jones's performance was considered to be absolutely fantastic, and it was absolutely fantastic because it really captured life in the 1970s. And he got a Golden Globe nomination for that performance, while Diahann Carroll was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Actress. And as he continued on with his career 3 years later, he played his iconic role as the voice of Darth Vader in Star Wars A New Hope, as people call it, but I will always call it Star Wars. And that role became the role that became his definitive signature role, playing the voice of one of the greatest villains of all time in Darth Vader. And this role basically wound up becoming, again, a definitive role, because the original actor that they had, David Prowse, couldn't really play the role because his West Country accent really wasn't suitable for the role. And James Earl Jones was basically cast in this role and was uncredited for the first 2 Star Wars films, but by the time Return of the Jedi came around, they did give him credit for that role. And that role, again, was his signature definitive role as one of the greatest film villains of the 20th century. Anyone who knows the voice of Darth Vader, again, this role basically is one of the definitive roles of the 20th century. And I would say James Earl Jones, again, was a master of that role. Master of that role because, again, Darth Vader, everyone knows the voice of Darth Vader, and everyone knows the iconic lines of that he said in Empire Strikes Back in 1980 when he confirmed that he was Luke Skywalker's father. I mean, he's known for that voice in that plot twist, and he's known for that voice, again, for that role. Now, James Earl Jones did go on to get a Grammy in 1977 as well for a spoken word album for Great American Documents, and also was all doing TV shows such as the show Police Drama Paris, and also played in Roots: The Next Generations as the older version of Alex Haley. Now, as James Earl Jones came into the 1980s, in addition to doing Star Wars, he got another Tony for playing a role in August Wilson's Fences as a father who was dealing with the world of Jim Crow. And this got him a second Tony Award. And he also, in that same decade, in addition to playing Darth Vader, played another iconic villain in Conan the Barbarian as Thulsa Doom. I mean, I remember watching Conan and I was floored as a kid watching him play in Conan, because again, in science fiction and fantasy, we don't get to see many black performers get roles, and I was happy to see James Earl Jones playing the role in Conan as a kid, and I was even happier to see him play in the legendary film Coming to America, which I consider another signature role as the King of Zamunda. I mean, that was a major part of my teenage years, and I was really happy to see him in that role. And he also had a role in the film Field of Dreams, again another iconic film of the 1980s. You just had to be there in the 1980s, because that film with the signature line, if you build it, they will come. This is again a core 1980s movie, and it's one of those films that defines the decade. I mean, if you think about 1980s movies, Field of Dreams is one of the major iconic films of the 1980s. And again, James Earl Jones had a major role in that film. And he also, again, starred in an independent film, Matewan, which dramatized the Battle of Matewan on a coal miner strike and got an Independent Spirit Award. And he also played the role of the Pharaoh in the Hanna-Barbera's Greatest Adventure Stories of the Bible, and also played roles in Tom Clancy movies such as The Hunt for Red October, Patriot Games, and Patriot Games. Again, two of the biggest films of the 90s. I mean, you had to be there for those movies before playing yet another signature role, which was Mufasa in The Lion King. This is the one that many millennials will remember him by. This is the one many millennials will remember him for. I mean, if you're a millennial and you were around in the 90s, you knew that The Lion King was one of the biggest films of the late 20th century. You knew it was one of the biggest films of the 90s. And James Earl Jones played another, again, signature role as Mufasa, the Lion King. He also reprised that role in 2019. And after he wound up playing that role, he wound up getting 2 Emmys in that year, in addition to the National Medal of the Arts, one for the 90s TV series that only lasted a season, Gabriel's Fire, and another for supporting actor in Heat Wave. And also wound up playing another show called Pros and Cons. I mean, he was just continuing to get work, in addition to continuing to, again, put together really great television. And he also continued to work with PBS on shows like Square One Television. I mean, he always worked, and I remember him in the 90s from being the pitchman for Bell Atlantic, for the commercials where you could go, "Welcome to Bell Atlantic," and he would do poetry in Bell Atlantic commercials here in New York. I mean, I remember those commercials and watching him come out and talk in those commercials, and it was just absolutely fantastic. And he would always come out and, again, just give brilliant performances, and continued to do so in many different TV shows such as Lois and Clark and House and Big Bang Theory, and even did voiceovers for The Simpsons. Like, I remember the iconic one where he did the whole reciting the Raven poem as related to the first Treehouse of Horror. Just, again, a brilliant performance, and got Kennedy Center honors in 2002. And that, again, that's a great honor for a performer. Got a great honor for a performer, and also did the voice of the of the CNN, again, where he goes, "This is CNN." I mean, that went on for years, and again, went on to continue doing great performances. I mean, one of his later performances, he was cast in a Broadway revival of On Golden Pond, and he played in that performance. And he also played Big Daddy on Cat in a Hot Tin Roof, and was given a Screen Actors Guild Award. This is what he got in 2009. And in 2011, he got an honorary Oscar for his years of brilliant work as a performer, and then continued to go on giving great performances, and eventually gave a performance in Coming to America, a sequel that basically showed, again, a foreshadowing of the future where the king of Zamunda sadly wound up passing away. And that was a sad foreshadowing of the future for James Earl Jones, who continued to go on even in his 70s and 80s, continuing to give great performances. And again, Coming to America was considered to be his last screen credit. And he even when in the final years of his career, he wound up giving away his voice to Disney as related to Darth Vader, so that the character could go on. And in 2022, eventually wound up retiring from voice acting and moving on with his life. And moving on with his life as related to retirement, he retired, I think, in about 2022. And after he retired, he basically enjoyed the last days of his life, and sadly wound up passing away on my birthday. Sadly, on my 51st birthday. It was really sad to hear about his passing. I mean, it really floored me to hear about it, because James Earl Jones was a major part of my life for many years. I mean, his voice was a major part of my life. His voice was one that basically resonated with me for many years, and his work resonated with me for many years, because it was great to see a black performer like him transcend race to become an icon of the century. I mean, here was a man who basically was born in the era of Jim Crow, and he overcame his issues as related to stuttering and possibly anxiety to become one of the greatest thespians and greatest performers of the 20th century and the 21st century. And James Earl Jones went on to become one of the great icons of acting, and became one of the great icons of acting, and became one of the greatest performers in the history of acting. And he is basically a man I would really respect and celebrate, because, again, this man basically overcame great adversity, become, again, one of the greatest actors to win an Emmy, a Grammy, an Oscar, a Tony, a Screen Actors Guild Award, and many other awards and Kennedy Center honors. I mean, he is one of the greatest black American performers, and I have nothing but respect for James Earl Jones, again, a role model for any black man out here as related to black manhood and black masculinity. Now, he was married to white women, and again, that I don't have an issue with that at all. Just this man has great character and is one of the most respected performers. And he was married twice, and he was married to Julianne Marie, who he met while he was performing Othello, and they wound up divorcing in 1972. But in 1982, he married Cecilia Hart, a wife who passed away again in 2016, and who he had a son named Flynn. That's his legacy as a family. But his great legacy as related to performing is, I would consider to be the thing about James Earl Jones. Again, a brilliant performer, a brilliant actor, a great man. We should all, again, just be sad about mourning his passing. And again, I'm just deeply saddened that James Earl Jones is no longer with us. I mean, this man, again, I consider him to be one of the greatest performers of the 20th century. Again, a master thespian and a master of his craft. Who basically took black actors to another level, and again became one of the greatest performers of acting in general, one of the greatest actors of the 20th century, and I'll always remember him for his many great and iconic signature performances that he made all throughout the decades. Now available in paperback and e-readers, The Temptation of John Haynes. Give in to temptation and pick up this action-packed African-American paranormal romance. Get The Temptation of John Haynes in paperback and e-readers today. Support Black-owned and Black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.